Vignette.
Our vignette today is
Iron Maiden's Powerslave a concept album?
do we really need to answer this question?
Well, you brought it up.
Yes.
And I think it's a good one.
I do think so. So we haven't had any discussion here.
No, like all the other episodes.
Like all the other episodes, that question on the table, do we start out yes or no and just go at it? Or is Iron Maiden's Powerslave a concept album? Yes or no, Joël?
I'm prepared. First of all, lyrically, yes. Every single track, lyrically, you can say that it's based on the concept of power. And especially because the last track is Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Mm-hmm. And that is probably outlining one of the most quintessential power issues for humanity, which is humanity's relationship with nature.
Yes.
So I think that because it ends on that note, it definitely says to me that it is conceptually driven by the idea of power, lyrically. However, there is a fly in the ointment.
Yes.
Lost for words. That to me is the fly in the ointment.
Right.
All the other tracks I think are legitimately about power. They just talk about it in different ways.
Okay.
So I'm going to attempt to craft a half-baked justification for there being an instrumental as being evoking the concept of power.
Okay, that's interesting.
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy right now.
Yeah, I'm.
So the thing about all the songs, they talk about different personifications of human power, right? So you've got military warfare, you've got young men imagining power in the duelist. You've got the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I said about nature and that. You've got Powerslave, which is about someone's focus on power because of their fear of death. And there's other themes in there as well. But all of these things are being conveyed through words. It's a very powerful thing whenever you can get something to happen without having to say anything at all. It's very powerful, so to speak, when you can take away people's ability to speak and say what they think. So in a sense, conceptually, you could say that Lost for Words is an instrumental, is conveying symbolically, musically, power through the absence of words. And that's where I let it rest.
Right. Okay. Now, we've seen concept albums before that have had, more or less sort of through line narrative, right? So
are you talking about lyrically?
Lyrically, yeah, lyrically, and the inclusion of an outlier within a concept album doesn't necessarily break the concept album. So
no, that's fair. That's fair.
I what I appreciate is I appreciate very much that
How
you
far
would
I went?
well that you would put that up to sort of make an argument that this isn't an outlier that I need to excuse to make this logic fit for me, but that this song in particular is conveying the same concept as an instrumental, so that it, like, I'm arguing that there is no outlier on this, yes, and that it fits, and I think that's very cool. And I don't disagree, although I didn't feel the need to make that argument because I would have been comfortable enough to let it be an outlier,
right,
or so much of whether. They could have just tagged that on to another song, and like, it's not uncommon to have musical interludes yep, within a Iron Maiden album. So absolutely, a song as an interlude in some ways could be equally conceptually consistent as a
Agreed.
Just
But I wanted to go for Double Jeopardy.
well, I think that's cool because now I'm going to have to go listen to that again and sort of meditate on the conveyance of power or the dynamic of
Because the title is Lost for Words.
Yeah.
So it made me think about
well,
it that way.
there are no words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so-
that's what it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But you're right. You're
Yeah.
very right about how to have an instrumental bit in a concept album or an outlier, it doesn't, because we're always talking about what a concept album is, and we have that ambiguity. We're comfortable with it.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely both of us in our very first episode when we explored the question of what is a concept album, we had to address right away, some concept albums are narrative and some are thematic and some are, like a bit more esoterically conceptual or, have
Love Supreme and
So, I think within our own discourse here, we're much more able to accept a broader gathering of things into the sort of concept album universe that others may be fighting with, right?
So you do think,
but I consider absolutely Powerslave as a concept album.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that it's not just the common acceptance and parlance of the album through people that they don't think it's a concept album.
Yeah.
I think from the imagery alone,
the cover is amazing.
The cover and then the tour, which really took them to the next level, right? Where the band, the tour, the album, and like you say, the themes of the songs to do with power and power dynamics, and particularly where power also represents the decision over life and death.
Yeah.
So it's power through the exercise of death and
so many of the songs are about that.
Yeah, and so which is an ultimate sense of what is power but the ability to define life and death. And it made me think of Conan, the Barbarian, and the Riddle of Steel. And
that's a great soundtrack, by the way. Amazing soundtrack.
Amazing soundtrack and amazing film, by the way, as well. Everybody, one of my favorite films growing up. But I loved when Thulsa Doom is talking to Conan right before they crucify Conan on the Tree of Woe. By the way, we've never had a conversation about this. But
we didn't do that on purpose.
No. And he's querying basically Conan's belief system, and he says, boy, there was a time when I was like you, and I was pursuing the riddle of steel, and the questions of life and how how I ordered the universe through basically this idea of the riddle of steel and strength through that. And he says, but what do you think is more powerful, boy? Steel or flesh? Like what's more powerful? And he sees a girl. He just sort of, in the film, they have Thulsa Doom. He's kind of looking around like he's just casually, oh, there's a girl up there, and he basically beckons the girl to come to him, and she just steps off a cliff and falls and kills herself on the ground, and he's like, that boy, that is flesh is where it's at, like the strength of that, and the choice of flesh surrendering to death in that way. It was stronger than the blade that would have killed that person. Flesh decided to take out flesh, and so in this album, that there's so much of this is about death and the dynamic between being a slave to your to steal, basically, to try and gain dominion over death, and then the contrast between nature and flesh. It's
a brilliant culmination at the end of that song Powerslave and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Yeah, those two together, and it's surprising to me that the band didn't embrace this as a concept album there was a little bit of politic, I think, a band politic in there because Bruce, in an interview, I remember sort of when he was looking back on Powerslave, he sort of goes, "Oh well, after all, I wrote the title track that the album was, named after, and it was sort of, it was almost like, yeah, they hadn't considered it up until that point, and so like, Powerslave was just a song that Bruce happened to write, but somehow at the same time everything kind of unified there. And for the first time, like there was a unification of theme through the songs. They weren't just sort of like random film vignettes, random film narratives, right? They had a commonality, even though you're still jumping in time. You're going from the Blitz to the Duelist, right? To
you're going to 2 Minutes to Midnight, which is
even
atomic
warfare and into the Cold War, and it's which in some ways is related to me in the Two Tribes Go to War video that had come out. What's the name of that band?
Frankie Goes
to Hollywood. Yeah. Like so like another thematic musical sort of take on presenting sort of like the Cold War, sort of where we were at that moment in history. And, I just, so that unity through those themes on all those songs, I think is by no means a stretch to sort of take that as a concept album. But I would say this is an album, not birthed through intentionality. I think that's obvious.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
But it's one that by theme, that everybody should still be looking at it as a concept album, because I think thematically, not only where it sits in their evolution as a band and as a live act, and sort of coalescing their and focusing their sort of creativity at a sort of a coalescence, that there was this sort of magical coming together that just defined that album and that era as a new departure for them. And so not only is it a concept album to me, it's really the birth of the band. Going forward as a cohesive unit, in its new sort of like no longer shaky leg incarnation.
Yeah, and so it was like they became incorporated, to put a kind of an ugly business spin on it, but they had reached a point where they had a strong foundation. Yeah, and then they gave more than that foundation.
Well, where again, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's the emergent element of this. I think this emerges as a concept album. And I think that, there's a liminal space that Powerslave, even when you talk about Powerslave to people today, like there's a sort of an excitement or a lift that comes with just people kind of know something special happened there.
They do?
Yeah, I do. Anyone I've ever talked to about Powerslave, right. Which right now is you.
I was thinking about calling my dad and asking him, Dad, what do you think of Powerslave? But I get what you're saying. And I know that when I was being schooled into Maiden, Powerslave was the center of the buffet. Yeah. Right? Because Somewhere in Time had come out. Yeah. But you're right. And Powerslave was the one where they had the huge shows at Hammersmith Odeon. And they had, I imagine, had worked out a lot of the touring theatrical bugs. And they had really just, like I said, they had come to a point of, this is what Maiden is. Yeah. These like we've gone beyond establishing. We are here.
We're here, exactly. And I really think that in the same way in our Zappa discussion, we talked about, Zappa's album being a concept album because Frank said it was, at some point, right? Well, this is a concept album not because the band said it was or intended it to be, but because it was emergent of the circumstances and the alignment of the stars that basically came together when this album was created. And if you believe in liminal things, if you believe in the idea of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts, then the idea of the emergence of a concept album as an event unto itself, it should be perfectly acceptable, and I think universal within Maiden fandom. Like, I mean, I think that that there should be no bones about it. Like, it can't not be a concept album.
Well, I have no bones about it.
There we go.
It's been decided.
It has been decreed.
Well, this was a very pleasurable first vignette.
A little vignette, yeah. Now,
and people can expect more of these.
More of these.
Little moments of discussion about particular things we think we want to just pass back and forth. And much like our regular episodes, we will let each other know that we want to talk about this particular thing, but then there's no other conversation until we have this moment.
Yeah. And so thanks for listening. And well, I'm sure we're going to,
I've just thought about 3 others. There'll be more coming.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Rob.